everybody, and welcome to The Watch Inquiry, a journalistic look into the watch world past, present and future, with me, Tim Barber.
And me, Chris Hall.
And for this episode, we're bringing you part 2 of our rundown of what we think are the most game-changing watches of the past 15 years. Okay, Chris, I'm going to kick off part 2 with one of the real big cheeses of the entire watch world, and that is the Nautilus from Patek Philippe.
All right.
And specifically, the editions released by Patek almost a decade ago in 2016 to mark the 40th anniversary of the watch. Now, you could question the worth of picking an anniversary watch in our list, and a limited edition at that, but as we're going into the 50th anniversary of the Nautilus, it's kind of interesting, I think, to look back at how they marked the last big anniversary. And more importantly, the return to the Sports Luxe bracelet, integrated bracelet watch, as defined by Gerald Genta in the 70s with the Nautilus, the Royal Oak, and of course plenty of other watches, has been such a dominating trend over the past decade that we wanted to address it. And of course, the Nautilus anniversary came just at the moment, really, when the whole genre was really beginning to catch fire. And there was a big question over, how are they going to mark this moment? And they did it in kind of the most Patek and least Patek way. The landscape setting here is that we were always told, and we would always propagate in a way, the message that the flagship model of Patek Philippe was, and always shall be the Calatrava. It's the Calatrava that stands for everything. And, 10 years ago, the Nautilus was more than a niche favourite, but it was certainly specialist, kind of a bit off to one side.
Yes.
And I think something whose coolness and appreciation seemed to belong in some ways more to Patek's community than to Patek itself, really. Bit of a difficult child. And then you had this acceleration. And the 40th anniversary collection, which was 2 watches, okay, the 5711 in platinum with a blue dial and diamond Marcus, and then the 5976 chronograph, also with a blue dial and diamond Marcus. Sorry.
Stop it, please.
And then this strange inscription on the dial as well, marking the anniversary. It looked like a 5711, but it was platinum, I should make that point, and it had diamond indexes. So it was understated and overstated at the same time. But in a sense, what it was is less important than what it symbolized at that moment, which was a re-coming of age of this kind of watch. We'd had the 40th anniversary of the Royal Oak 4 years before, and that had been significant, but not industry-wide significant in the same way.
No, oddly enough, you're right. And it's not to say the Royal Oak occupies a sort of lesser standing than the Nautilus. It's more just the fact that this came along. Just 4 years passing was enough time for things to really gather momentum.
Yeah.
Because I think when we were looking at this before we recorded, we go back over it and you look at the number of the sort of integrated bracelet watches that were either making their debuts or being revived at the same time. And the Nautilus 40 was neither the first nor the last, but it's effectively the poster child for this wave of enormous consumptive enthusiasm for everything Genta ever touched, looked at or thought about, and everything that derives from that.
Yeah, I mean, we could have, and almost did pick the Tiffany dial Nautilus instead, but I think that the reason we picked the 40th anniversary is that it was in some ways the kickoff moment for people talking about, getting excited about, reassessing exactly what the Nautilus is, and by extension, what that genre of integrated bracelet, steel, watch is, even though this one was platinum. There's something interestingly gauche about it. You know, it has this, okay, it's a lovely, very deep blue dial, and then this engraving, this laser engraving on the dial that says 1976 to 2016 with a 40 in between. And it's both, you know, it's subtle and immensely unsubtle at the same time, right? You know, it is sort of gauche, brazen, showy because of the diamond indexes, and it's platinum. It had nothing really to add to the design other than a sort of self-reflexive bit of engraving and celebration.
It's funny you say that, because I looked at it as we were about to record this and thought, gosh, at the time we thought that was quite, as you say, a little bit gauche, a little bit, bit odd. And then obviously also by the standards of what's come to pass since, I think it's actually quite subtle and restrained. You know, we're sort of now, we're in a post sort of Rainbow Aquanaut world as well,
Yes.
aren't we? And it's tastes have changed, things have moved on, and we're a little bit more expressive these days.
There are definitely the watches on this list that are more symbolic. I'll tell you one thing I'd forgotten, Chris.
Yeah.
Do you know what this watch was limited to? So you've got the 5711 and you've got the chronograph. Do you know what the limited editions were? What's the ballpark that you'd imagine?
For 250 pieces?
In platinum. Yeah, 250 maybe.
Okay, yeah.
So the 5711 was limited to 700 pieces, and the chronograph was limited to 1,300 pieces.
Wow, so 2,000 pieces of these two references.
That's right. By the way, the 5711 was in platinum and the chronograph's white gold.
I mean,
Both with diamond indexes. I mean, that's a ton of editions.
that's a sizable chunk of their overall Nautilus run, like whenever that was made.
Yes, exactly.
Let's inspect the game changer credentials for this watch. I think to do so, you really have to think back to what things were like then as opposed to now, because I feel indoctrinated to all things Genta that I can't really remember a world when this was.
No, it's really weird. But we were in a Black Bay world, you know, in a funny sort of way.
As discussed,
and, you know, Patek, if it was doing anything interesting, was doing, you know, like plenty of other people, retro pilots watches, for instance.
Yeah.
And you had, but you know, there was certainly already the flickerings of a return to these kind of watches. So I think that Girard-Perregaux had brought back the Laureato, or had revamped the Laureato.
Yeah, that was up and running. I think the Piaget Polo S, as it was then called, had launched possibly earlier the same year.
Yeah,
because this Nautilus launch was in the autumn of 16, wasn't it?
That's right.
It was,
yeah. So the Piaget came, which, you know, and I suppose in some ways that was quite a bellwether, because Piaget, which up till then had said, we only do gold watches, we are a dress watch brand, we do super thin gold dress watches, and then they launched a steel sports watch that was, you know, a pretty blatant take on the Nautilus, but less interesting. And thank goodness they've done something more interesting with the Polo name now. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So you have obviously the Vacheron Overseas got overhauled.
That was the following year, wasn't it?
Yep.
2017.
2017 with the interchangeable bracelets, you know, more fluid design, and then a whole slew.
Do you remember the Urban Jurgensen?
Yes. Actually, that was already out. That, I think, came in 2015, 2016. So that was
right?
one of the sort of early ones.
Yeah.
And then probably the absolute pinnacle of the genre, which is the Ripples by Speak Marin.
Oh.
A handsome watch with an equally elegant name. And so I think that the Nautilus 40th anniversary is impactful because it happens to hit at the moment when the market was ready for it to hit.
It's a bit of a lightning rod, isn't it?
It's a lightning rod. It's a moment. And of course, following that, the Nautilus takes off. It feeds through into the speculation of 2021, everything that went on, that sort of culminates with the Tiffany dial a few years later. And if nothing else, it's the watch that officially ended the Calatrava as the flagship of Patek Philippe.
Well, that's fair enough. I think, although we've picked it about a little bit, that is a game changer in its own way.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you agree. But anyway, enough of that, quite frankly. Let's move it along. Chris, where are we going next?
I'm going to move us from the Nautilus to the Royal Oak. Now, we've just spoken about the stratospheric rise in the popularity of that stainless steel sports luxe watch and its many, many imitators, but I'm going to look at a different Royal Oak entirely. Okay, this is the AP Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar Black Ceramic, which came out at the start of 2017.
Okay.
And this, for me, is game-changing because it presented a vision of true horlogerie fused with these kind of modern materials that I'm going to contend up until then had not really been the preserve of this tier of traditional watchmaking.
Well, they hadn't been able to make these materials worthy of that tier. If you sort of heard AP at the time, the work that it took on the ceramic.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bit of a sort of industrial machining story there, but I want to talk a little bit about what perpetual calendars are for AP, because I think the significance of this watch is better understood when you realise the way they have seen it themselves to do it. Because I think we can look at it as outsiders and go, okay, yeah, you did your watch in black ceramic. Much as these days you can count on most iconic watch designs being replicated in most materials. Not really the case, I think, for this at the time. Perpetual calendars for Audemars Piguet they're quite a core text if you're within the brand. Okay, so they are fundamental to its revival since the mid-80s. The development of the perpetual calendar reference 5548 in 1977. Yes, I am looking at my notes. Helped to steer the brand out of the quote-unquote quartz crisis.
That's the very elegant round.
It's a beautiful, simple round case.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
At the same time as they were making the Royal Oak, they would have said that was the flagship of the brand at the time.
This was the only series-produced perpetual
watch,
other than Patek, the only other company to make any perpetual calendar in series. And then they put that movement in the Royal Oak in 1984.
Yeah.
And that had a really gilded position at the top of the Royal Oak family. But that watch and that movement and those watches that were made at that pivotal moment for the industry are really part of the myth of modern day AP.
Right.
And I think you have to bear that in mind when you assess the significance of them going, okay, the Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar only ever made in traditional metals, including, by the way, their bimetal tantalum and gold, which is really fun. I think they really surprised everyone when this watch came out. There was very little sense that this was coming. Everybody drew breath and thought, "Oh my god, they've done it, and it works."
It's super
a risk.
Cool. I think they did. How many did they do? 50
God,
of them.
Not many.
It was. They had one at SIHH, and it was one of those watches that looks very good in pictures, but in the hand and on the wrist, it's something else altogether.
It really worked. And this is, as you say, you alluded to this to begin with, it's all in the details. It's how they were able to actually make this, and not to sound too much like I speak for the brand, but it was able to match up to the standards they expected of themselves.
Yeah.
Because ceramic watches had existed before. Ceramic watches in all forms had been around for a while, but they were becoming more popular in the years leading up to this. You've got pieces like IWC, for example, Ceratanium and those kind of things.
Also, AP they'd been messing around with carbon fiber with in the offshores.
Yep.
And I remember the first carbon fiber APs. I think it was called the Grand Prix, which had this carbon fiber bezel and case. And now, if you see them, they look like they've been, lawnmowers gone over them or something, because they're quite cool for that reason, but, they were all in on carbon fiber, and then I think they just sort of went, no, we can't do this, the high enough quality. And it's literally a pivot from that to going, okay, we're going to do ceramic to this level, to the level that Genta defined the Royal Oak in 72 with stainless steel. And the story repeats itself of the impossibility of the machining and all that kind of thing.
Exactly, because that's a design that lives and dies on its sharp, crisp lines, the juxtaposition of the brushing and the polishing and the geometry. We've been there many, many times before, but to see that executed in glossy black ceramic with the slightly mattifying effect you get of the brushed bits and then the polishing and the links of the bracelet. People have done ceramic cases plenty before, but the bracelet, honestly, was where so much of the work got done here. It was hard, I think, to execute.
Yes, because I was going to say 5 words to you, which is Dark Side of the Moon.
Dark Side of the Moon, 5 very relevant words. Of course, the 2013 Omega brought out the Dark Side of the Moon Speedmaster.
That was 2013, was it? Right, okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, I didn't think it was that long ago.
No, exactly. And yes, that probably did also mark a significant moment in ceramic and in watch design generally, but they're not an haute horlogerie brand in the same way AP is. And for AP to take not just any watch, but the absolute flagship of its absolute icon and bring it out in that execution, that was huge.
Yeah, it was stunning. And then, of course, they did it in... Had they already done it in white at this point?
No, this was the first. This was the first Simon ceramic. They did white.
Then they did white and they did blue.
And the Travis Scott collab in brown.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you can look at that and sort of basically nod your head and go, oh, yeah, that makes sense, says a huge amount about what the first one did for perceptions of this kind of top-tier watchmaking.
Yeah. But, I mean, would you say that this is more significant, is more of a game changer, and this is a serious question, than the Spider-Man Rolex?
Serious question about a serious watch. I think in its way, yes. And I'm partly saying that because I think the full impact of the Marvel collaborative projects might yet to be felt. And I feel like I'm dodging a little bit, but
well, there's something about the kind of like as you say, like the mixture of the haute horlogerie brand incorporating something that you would not consider haute horlogerie as it did when it made the Royal Oak in 72, and doing it to this degree. And so they, the Spider-Man they're doing the same trick again, but in a pop cultural way, in an even more postmodern way. I mean, I would agree with you on the perpetual calendar being more significant on the basis that I think the Spider-Man watch is so ugly and
well, this is a sort of confirmation bias or positivity bias. Call it
I
what you will,
embrace that bias. I embrace that confirmation bias thoroughly.
But I think there is something to that. The fact that the perpetual calendar in black ceramic was, I would say, almost universally loved from the moment it first broke cover.
Yeah,
that does inevitably change our impressions of of its impact and significance.
So let me ask you: would you pick the black ceramic, the blue ceramic, or the white ceramic perpetual calendar Royal Oak?
I'd pick the black,
right,
all day, every day. Not least because it was, I believe, it first still for me matters.
Yeah,
right? I think the iterations on the color theme are not, granted, when you make ceramics, it's not as simple as just picking a color. It's actually quite hard to sort of produce the right color effect in different ceramics. That's why you don't see every color in the rainbow. If you're asking personally, white watches just don't necessarily sit that well, white ceramic with me. But and the blue again is an acquired taste. But for me, the black has brooding presence that I find quite compelling.
Yeah, totally agree. It is the final boss of black ceramic watches still to this day, should you ever find it. Right. So next up, you're on again, Chris.
Yes, so we're still with me, and we're going to stick in the same year, right? So earlier in the year, of course, we've had that black ceramic QP from Audemars Piguet, and later on, something completely different. This is the Ming 17.01.
The what?
Ming watches.
Ming.
Yeah. And the reasons are several, but one is partly to symbolize the micro brand phenomenon.
Right.
Now, this is loaded terminology. Not everybody loves the phrase microbrand. In fact, I think almost universally every company that's had it said about them ends up disavowing the label. For reasons that are understandable, it feels like it's limiting. It feels like it is perhaps a little bit reductive, but
it feels like you did a Kickstarter and got lucky.
Yes, but that's what so many of these projects were, at least to begin with. In 2016, 2017, the micro brand, the word micro brand was barely used. If you do a little search, I did a search on Google history, nobody really even talked about micro brands prior to 2016. This was very much a new phenomenon. If you want to talk about what changed the game in the period during which you and I have both been watch journalists, you cannot ignore the rise of the micro brands.
Yeah.
Now, why Ming and why this watch? Well, I think because they've risen further and achieved more and done so with one of the more coherent and creative ranges of watches than many others.
I think they embraced or they achieved credibility instantly with people who would never look at a Kickstarter watch.
Yeah.
Normally. I know they, to be clear, they were not a Kickstarter brand, but people who would never look at a startup brand or something fresh and modern looked at Ming and went, that's cool. And it also had an aesthetic that was clearly design-led and new and different.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we talked earlier about the importance of sort of courting the collector community, and there was certainly an element of that here. I mean, Ming Thien, the founder, the eponymous founder,
Yeah, who is he?
Sort of from that world, right? He was
just unpack that a bit.
I mean, he's among other things, sort of he was a prominent participant in sort of watch forum culture, and that, you know, the earliest digital communities, if you like, the earliest
Purists
online communities for watches. Yeah, the Purist Pro. But this is where people first started to properly be able to appreciate watches online.
It's where watch culture was born.
Yeah, arguably.
As we know it.
As we know it. And he comes from a place of, he is incredibly sort of dedicated and diligent, a connoisseur of watches in his own right, and then brought to this project a perfectionism that you need to sort of will something into being out of nothing.
Sort of literacy in watch culture.
Very literate. Yeah, exactly. A close connoisseur of watches, but as you already said, a deep desire to bring something fundamentally new to the table. Now, I think what I feel impressed me most of all about this watch and Ming watches generally is that it typifies the extent to which you can make something truly impressive, and it is completely removed from Swiss watchmaking culture.
So can we just describe this watch?
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
So with the Ming 1701, it's a time-only automatic. It's got black dial, white hands. It's got concentric minute-hour ring with the numerals sort of bleed into this ring. It's sort of quite contemporary typography, or almost completely sans serif suite of numerals. Very little else on the dial at all. Completely minimalist, which is a bit of a calling card for the brand. A black-coated case with these slightly flared, scalloped, almost sort of lug designs, a simple crown and a simple leather strap. And it's not necessarily game-changing or groundbreaking in terms of what this watch does on paper, but it does represent thoroughly new watch design.
Yeah, it's specifically modern,
Yeah.
but also specifically literate in watch classicism.
Yeah. It's not obviously in debt to any icons of the 20th century watch history.
No. And they did guilloche dial versions, I think, as well, with these beautiful sort of swirly patterns that, again, sort of connected back to some kind of classicism, but in modern fractal style.
Yes, exactly. And they followed so many of the sort of textbook models of what a quote-unquote micro brand will do. It's, you know, build the anticipation, then launch the watch, then limited run, then it's sold out, then repeat. You know, it's not retail-led. They don't put models on shelves and have stock. It's very evolutionary therefore, in its sense, and they're not the only ones to have done this by any means, but it's that whole idea.
They've copped their fair amount of criticism.
I think they've hit the kind of snags and headaches that anyone building a business will hit, and I think that they've handled it relatively well.
So what about micro brands? So if this is the sort of the in some ways a kind of a lightning rod for the micro brand genre, you know, the micro brands that people within the watch community have become excited by are the ones that, like Ming, have this specific understanding of the language and touch points of watch collecting, of high watch culture, and they're bringing that to in a more affordable way, but in some ways no less credible way. And they, you know, okay, the cases are made in China, the movements often are as well, but they still have the imprimatur of true passionate collectors, rather than the sort of the people who are just in it for the buck, I suppose.
There are, I think that's the problem with some of the sort of genre. As a catch-all term, there are some that were just in it for a quick buck. Yeah. Absolutely. I think with Ming, by the way, the movements are predominantly Schwartz Etienne, so there is again credibility, as you mentioned. Credibility comes from some of the people they've chosen to work with, and some of the ways they've chosen to do things.
Yeah.
I think something else I want to sort of reference in regard to Ming in particular and micro brands in general is that these are products of this period of watch history. Yep. I don't think these could have come about at any earlier period in time, because so much of watchmaking, the industry, the business, the ability to get things done was centralized in Switzerland and the few other countries that have had a history of watchmaking. You know, online retail is one, or drop shipping, direct e-commerce to the consumer, connected working. I dare say a company like Ming would have struggled to make its way in the early noughties or 90s when this kind of thing would have just been so much more of a barrier to doing business.
Yeah.
Rapid prototyping, when you can whiz out a 3D model and see what your watch is going to look like without having to fly to Switzerland to check a prototype off a production line.
And just reaching your market, reaching an audience in a completely different way. And that's certainly what, people like Unimatic and...
Another great example,
and of course, Studio Underdog have been able to do. And I think that there is that sense that, I would certainly say that someone like Studio Underdog and even some of the Masena Lab projects, and of course William Masena and Ming have collaborated.
Yep.
In some ways, it's all post-Ming culture. So I think that it was a stepping up of this stuff to something that seemed credible, desirable, and that you could get quite excited around.
Yes, I think that's true. I think they're the ones on this list because they're the ones who have survived and thrived and come this far.
Yeah, and still making waves. Okay, let's go to a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about another hero of the independent side of watchmaking. Support for the Watch Inquiry comes from Richard Anderson, a legend in English tailoring whose new store, Riches, is the last word in ready-to-wear elegance and style. If you value the craft and beauty of a fine wristwatch, you'll like the same qualities in a handmade garment too, which is what Richard has been creating on London's Savile Row for over 40 years. Now, the king of bespoke has brought that same mastery to ready-to-wear. At Riches, you'll find Japanese denim, moleskin trousers, Scottish knitwear, raincoats, and some fabulously natty silk dressing gowns that I've personally got my eye on, and plenty else besides. It's all cut from Richard's own patterns, made in small runs and built to last. It's English craft without the compromise and without the weight. Explore the full collection at richardandersonlimited.com, or even better, visit Riches in person at number 13 Savile Row. All right, well, let's go from one kind of independent brand to a completely different independent creator. And that is the man Recep Rexhepi, who was born with a watch brand name.
Well, it took him a while to find it.
But if you're called Recep Rexhepi, what are you going to do but put that name on a dial? And even that took him a few years because he was putting his real brand Crivia on the dials for a while. But I think that the watch we're going to talk about is the Chronometra Contemporain from Recep Rexhepi, released in 2018. Now, we knew Recep as this young watchmaker who had worked at Patek, worked at Journe, and had this brand called Acrivia.
Yeah.
Which was doing, fabulous watches, but that in some ways required you to commune with them quite closely. They had an unusual tonneau case design and some quite bold stylistic flourishes, but were, noticeably high-end. You had the tourbillon chronograph, tourbillon hour minute, regulator, jumping hour, chiming jumping hour, skeletonized things. And it was beautifully finished. When you turned it over, these incredible movement designs that had this symmetry and this sense of flow and art to them that was so lovely and so opposite to the real sort of brazenness of a lot of watchmaking at that time. But at the same time, they were very singular. And so he was making his name, but it was very, very small scale. Impressive, but small scale.
Yeah, I mean, to jump in, I remember you and I both worked at QP Magazine, which hosted Salon QP, and I remember he exhibited there 2 or 3 years on the bounce.
Yeah.
And we would often we would go and say hello and see what he was doing and be, as you say, impressed and enraptured by what there was. But you didn't exactly have a crowd gathering around his sort of table. It was flying under the radar, a lot of the stuff.
It was slightly unknowable.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was, it was only once he brought out what you could, ostensibly call a boring round watch that the game fundamentally changed, and not just for him, but for independent watchmaking. So the Chronometra Contemporain is a classic round watch inspired by vintage officers' watches. It has this tremendously elegant and actually unusual dial design with the Roman numerals, with the large sub-seconds. It is, of course, a chronometer. And it has, when you turn it over, this wondrous movement that is completely symmetrical, with the barrel in the middle and the two gear wheels side by side. And it just has this lovely, homogeneous sense of artistry and as well as construction. You know, it's a brilliant piece of mechanics, but it's a brilliantly sensitive piece of design.
It's stunning.
That also foregrounds finishing to a degree that was, you know, we'd seen elsewhere, obviously, with people like Laurent Ferrier and going right back to Philippe Dufour. And of course, Rexchep is described by many as the sort of the inheritor of what was started by Philippe Dufour.
I mean, what a label to have applied to you at a young age, right? I mean,
it is, and of course, it was this watch, you know, something like his sixth or seventh watch that he was able to have that label placed upon him. This is his simplest watch up to that point.
This is his simplicity
in many watches. Yes, it is. It's literally that.
Yeah.
And that he was retailing for something like 40,000, and you know, and these will now auction.
I mean, if you bought that then for that money, you did well.
You really did.
You really
did. And of course, now he's got the CC2, which take things even further. And we're loving seeing the brand develop from these beautiful workshops in the heart of Geneva. And there's a real sense, you know, I think that not just a watchmaker, but a brand and a legacy has, from this watch, exploded into the watchmaking scene. And more than that, this has been a gateway for, I think, a lot of people, including for a lot of watchmakers. And so this new generation, you mentioned some of their names earlier, but Simon Brett, Remy Couls, Sylvain Pinault, in a sense, you know, whether their watches are exactly like him, that they're tending to be in a more classical vein and almost a sort of elevated mannerist version of classicism than they are trying to be something like MB&F or Auvergne or something that expresses its independence through really bold design. So it's a return to classicism, and with this absolute emphasis on finishing as a deep part of the entire attraction and appreciation of the watch. You look at Petermann Badat as well, and Rexchep, and in particular the Chronometra Contemporain, which has his name on it rather than a Crivier, is the key. It'll be interesting to see
that
how
is significant as well.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I do wonder how he's going to resolve that eventually. You know, is he a Crivier? Is he Rexchep? Where does that go? We'll have to see. You know,
I like to think that the aesthetic is sufficiently different between the two that they might have a continued sort of coexistence. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that
it's like an artist who records under a pseudonym for a sort of genre of music, but then dabbles in something else. You know, it's possible, I think, to do both.
You know, on his website there is the collection Crivier and collection Rexchepi. So, which of those eventually is the dominant one? Yeah, and the other thing to say is, of course, the Crivier, those slightly stranger earlier watches that I think they continue to produce the Crivier watches in those style, and you know, on the secondary market, those are now, you know, in auctions going up and up as well. So I mean, there's very few of them. You know, they're made in tiny numbers. Yeah, those Crivier ones, so they're very rare and all the more appreciated. But I think that there are very few names who are on that top tier of Philippe Dufour, François-Paul Journe, Kari Voutilainen, and he is up there. It's still in his 30s.
Annoyingly young, sickeningly young.
Incredible. Yeah. But this is the watch that did it, and I cannot think of another watch that's had, you know, it does, of course, it follows on the back of things like the Gallet from Laurent Ferrier, which, you know, I did think of could be in here as well. You know, it came several years earlier, and in some ways pulls a similar trick. But I would say that the Rexhepi watch pulls that same trick, but considerably better. I mean,
I think
it's literally takes it to several degrees further.
Is there, do you think, a parallel between the MB&F, the horological and legacy machines, and the Akrivia and Rexhep own name?
There is, isn't there? That's
lines.
true. I hadn't thought of that, but yes, you and maybe this is true in other areas as well, but you make your name in some ways, or you earn your stripes in experimentation and going crazy. But where you really cement your legacy is when you apply the skills you've learnt to classicism,
Right.
and then reinvent classicism in the process. That's certainly what MB&F's done with the LM. That's what Rexhep's done with the chronometric contemporary, for sure.
All right.
So, talking of classicism,
Superb.
let's move on to Rolex.
Well, exactly. None more mainstream, none more known than Rolex. And yet they have, as we see it, in the last 15 years, produced a real game changer. Only one, some might ask. Yes, possibly. I think only one. We did sort of debate this, didn't we? We did debate this, but we're going to ask you, as we have throughout this list, going to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of someone who hasn't seen certain watches. Okay, so you need to imagine the emoji day date. You haven't seen that yet. The bubbles doesn't exist. Even the left-handed GMT Master. These watches are yet to come. Right, the Oyster Perpetual 36mm collection of 2020, which came out in 41mm as well, by the way, but it's the 36 for reasons we'll get into that we're on. And this was the collection with the bright coloured dials. Okay, so of course, I mean, it just feels so absurd to sort of hold that up as a game changer, because we've just been swamped with colourful dials since, and not even since, but slightly before. And yet, for Rolex to do it, it meant something.
But Chris, they'd done it before. They'd done it in the 1970s, right? That's what we call the stellar dials. So this wasn't even new for Rolex.
Well, no, I guess. Is anything ever completely new for Rolex? Yeah, sure, it wasn't. But this is a number of things, right? I mean, we've talked about brands reacting to demand, reacting to the market. So there's an element of that at work here, I think. But also this is the impact of that one collection at the same time. So it's a set of 5 or 6. And this idea that you don't just sort of drip feed these things out, and we'll do the blue one this year and the green one next year, and then we'll wait a year and then we'll do one the year after that. It's the wham, bam, here it is. You're probably going to want to buy them all if you can. Impact. We keep returning to that word, impact.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was. This sounds silly, but it was viscerally exciting when it happened. For Rolex to do something that had multiple colors all at the same time, dipping their hands in the rainbow, and it was kind of, oh my gosh. And of course, we were in the thick of the pandemic at the time, right? So
yeah. I mean, this is obviously, yes. This is how sad watch guys are, isn't it? This is what we find viscerally exciting, but that's true. We were so enthused by it. I mean, the energy and enthusiasm expended in writing and talking about these watches and trying to acquire these watches. The
market went bananas. I mean,
yeah. We mentioned the bubbles. This is the collection which precipitated that, because that edition was a knowing nod back at these 5, because that took all of those colours on one dial. But honestly, I can't overstate enough how, without having seen this frankly unusual level of playfulness from Rolex over the last few years, how significant this felt at the time.
An additional thing is that, of course, one of the dials was this Tiffany blue, and it came following straight on from the Patek Tiffany. So you had this additional, I mean, not only was colour coming back into the watch world, we'd had the year of, blue dials a few years before, then we had green dials. And this was Rolex saying, all right, all the colours are relevant.
Yeah.
Bright is good. And just as the world was imploding, it seemed, here came a sort of a ray of horological sunshine, which we needed. And of course, just as we were talking about with the Black Bay earlier, every brand followed suit, right?
Yeah. And of course, how deliberate that could possibly have been, that timing, that landing, we're not sure. It can be these things take. But
serendipity is a huge part of this stuff always, but
yeah,
it seems that some brands are more serendipitous than others, and Rolex has that one nailed, I think, doesn't it?
It's amazing, that ability to continually somehow seem to be one move ahead of its competitors. It wasn't long after that Omega had to do the Aquaterra in exactly the same sort of run of colours. And
I mean, one of the things that I think is because we're so used to having to find ways to be excited about 1 millimeter difference in the Submariner dimensions or something like that.
That's true.
But
Expectations were
that when it comes with all of these colours, you just go, oh my God, someone literally turned the lights on in the Rolex design studio, and they let themselves go,
and that's what's been happening ever since.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yes. By the way, they were certainly not the first brand to bring out a collection of colored dials in a single range of watches. But the thing is that when Rolex does it, it becomes official. It's like it's no longer a trend. It's now officially a sort of a kind of lore, LORE, within the industry that this is how things go down.
Yes, and that's so frustrating for those brands that do get there first and then want to go, no, but we had the idea, and you go, yes, indeed, but Rolex.
Yeah, and of course it makes a nightmare for the poor old ADs who have to deal with these things, and certainly those dials, went absolutely bananas on the market at the time, and other brands could probably only dream of their collections dropping and having the same impact, but it sets the marker.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, this is completely overlooking the fact that these models also introduced a new in-house caliber from Rolex. And we're just there going, no, colourful dials, please. Yeah. Which is, I know, we're so hypocritical. It runs counter to so many other things we say all the time. This brought in the 70-hour power reserve, the chronology escapement. But no.
Yeah.
One's pink, one's yellow, one's green, one's blue, and that's what we want, please. That's it.
Yeah. The interesting comparison, I suppose, is obviously to the Land Dweller, which is both more recent and certainly more substantial from many points of view. And we'll be able to see, I think, in a few more years, if we really think that's the game changer that it certainly promises to be. But no question, the modern Stellar Dial Oyster Perpetuals, that was a real flagpole moment in 2020.
And from one triumphal moment to another, we're looking to round up this list with a watch launch that has changed the game, rewritten the rules of the game in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it has done for good or just for one particular moment in time. This is one of those watches where I think we made the list and suddenly went, hang on.
You can't ignore.
We've forgotten that. Oh my God, of course it's obvious. And
drum roll, please.
This is the watch that had crowds around the world, people fighting in the queues, people declaiming the lack of online availability.
Crimes were committed.
Scalpers stepped into the watch industry and quickly stepped back out again. So this is the Moonswatch.
Of course.
And I mean, we don't need to rehearse, I suspect, the entire Moonswatch
if you're listening
story.
To this,
you probably know.
Yeah.
But I think that the Moonswatch is the one time when watch culture has crossed over completely into mainstream culture, and it created a cultural moment.
It's on the news. People who had no connections with watches were asking us what we knew about it. Could we get one? Have we seen it? Have we got one? What's it really like? Is it any good?
And it made analog watches relevant again. I mean, I think that Moonswatch mania was passing. It was exciting at the time. It was interesting. It was in that sort of post-pandemic moment of up being down and down being up, and mashups of high and low, luxury and affordable, legendary and novelty, and all of these things,
pop culture
coming together.
Yeah.
There was so much of that going on. There was a particular vibrancy and buzz, and I think the only comparable cultural moment is for when Swatch released the first Swatch in 1983. And you have the sense that no matter who you are, this thing's interesting.
Yeah, and as you've already mentioned, with the connection to that original Swatch, this did exactly what the first ones did, and it gave the industry, a certain sector of the industry in particular, a massive shot in the arm.
I think that, I mean, I certainly would question whether it would have any real lasting impact on Omega. It certainly did Omega no harm.
No.
But at the same time, it was a passing moment. It was then. We had the Snoopy ones. They've kept it going. There's been some new colors, and so it's no longer exciting. They can keep bringing out new colors forever now. It won't matter. The Moon Swatch is all about that particular moment.
Yeah.
And that particular fervor that, we probably will not see something like that again, but it was definitely a game changer in so many ways.
I think interesting you say we won't see something like that again, because I felt at the time that it legitimized something which I'd wondered about for a while, which was brand to brand collaboration. So two watch brands, now admittedly two watch brands under the same corporate umbrella, but two brands teaming up. And this has happened a little bit in the high-end independent world, but it's really something that you don't get much of at the mainstream level, because no brand wants to cannibalize or compromise on its own sort of marketing and strategy. I sort of saw this and hoped, perhaps naively, that we might actually get more of that. And there was a time, certainly, when people were speculating as to whether Swatch would look to work outside the Swatch group and to do this for other people. There was the great rumor was the idea of a bioceramic Richard Mille between, like, the Swatch Richard Mille, which would be nutty cool. That would set things going, but it doesn't seem like that's likely to happen. Who knows? Until it does happen, it'll seem unlikely, and it'll even seem unlikely when it does happen. That was the magic of the Moon Swatch itself, wasn't it?
Exactly,
we didn't see it coming.
No.
A few teaser ads in the newspapers, right? The Swiss broadsheet newspapers, a little bit of this is coming, Swatch X Omega, and the tactical masterstroke of putting it out there on the eve of Watches and Wonders, properly swept the rug from underneath the feet of the rest of the industry.
Yeah, and of course, that we all went off to Watches and Wonders, and everyone was talking about.
All anyone wanted to know was whether you'd got a Moon Swatch, and there's few people who did. Yeah, people were much more interested in that than what was actually being shown by the brands.
It was the talking point.
Yeah.
So look, we've done that. I think the Moon Swatch has probably been talked to death. We couldn't not talk about it, but I think that. But the interesting thing, of course, from our list is that was 2022, and that's where we're stopping our list because, well, why, Chris? Why not have something from 2023, 24?
I don't think it's to say there are no decent watches launched in that time, but I feel like by the standards we've laid out, you have to have demonstrated an impact. We have to have had a bit of time to digest and understand why what you did was significant. Now, these 11, as it turns out, have been the ones that rose to the top.
Yeah, it's too recent to have changed any games. In the last couple of years, probably. Okay, so that is our list.
Yeah.
But our last thing is we said we'd have one near miss each as well. So one not on our list, but we're going to give a little sort of a big up to one watch each that is not on the list.
Yes. Yeah, so we said that after our main list, we'd take a moment to talk about the ones that didn't quite make it. We're only allowing ourselves one each, which is hard. The original list was hard. I'm going to talk about a watch which I already briefly touched upon, and this is and you did as well, the Omega Dark Side of the Moon. We talked a little bit in passing regards AP and others about what it means to take an icon and change it in a way that does not massively upset the fan base. And I think that's what Omega managed in 2013 with the Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
I think the collection that followed actually diluted its impact a little bit, although it was commercially inevitable. But I think the first time you saw that watch in black ceramic, okay, it's today's taste, it's a little bit big, but on its own merits, I think it's a really cool watch, and it's really
super cool.
Yeah,
the way the movement sits in that bubble on the back of the ceramic case in itself is so interesting, and it's black, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
I agree.
I honestly, we could almost talk it onto the main list, but what was your not nearly but not quite?
Renaissance Type 1 Renaissance. I think it's it doesn't make the main list because it's too much of an outlier. It's a game changer for Renaissance, but I think that Renaissance does sit in a kind of category of its own. But in terms of positing the idea of that sort of meeting point of function and design in such a beautiful, strange way. And interestingly, that they've been able to keep iterating it. You know, although in some ways Resonance is a one-trick pony, it's been able to keep it going, which speaks for the strength of the design. But the Type 1, I just think it's fabulous. It's a watch I would love to own. I think it's terrific.
I agree. I think almost by definition, as you say, Resonance is its own thing, perhaps so much so that it can't necessarily change the entire industry, even though Benoit's idea is to show that watches can be made in a fundamentally different way.
Yeah.
But no, I wholeheartedly think that it's worth a mention.
All right. That's it.
Thank you so much for listening.
All right.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.